Chapter 4. Small, Still, Voice Within. Conscience. Pinocchio's conscience was a cricket by the name of Jiminy. The concept of a function within that provides moral guidance has been around forever. Some have called it the moral compass. Others their North Star. Still others, that small, still, voice within. I'll go with that one. It helps keep us stay true to our convictions and nudges us towards integrity. When you get out of line, it warns you, even if the voice is sometimes hard to hear. It makes up for its low volume and stillness by persisting like drops of water that eventually reshape a stone. Its whispering is incessant, relentless. Where does the voice come from? Directly from God? Or from a spirit assigned to the individual, his or her Jiminy Cricket from God? I think God or ultimate reality or universal mind or ground of being or pure potentiality or deepest source provides an individually tailored mechanism for our earthly mission. Only your spirit or connected self can whisper the specific things you need to know. God talk would go right over your head. We have a translator, messenger, angel. Dream messages. The night after getting a haircut, I had a dream that let me know I had missed the mark. One of the barbers told a There Goes the Neighborhood story about a person of Muslim faith moving into his neighborhood. The story was shared with my barber, not me. So, I rationalized that it was none of my business. I didn't feel like rocking the boat. But I did think the other barber's prejudice was not a good thing. Instead of calling him out on it, I stayed silent. That night, I dreamed that I was a prison guard. I dream about being in prison as psychologist or teacher quite often. I often get passes or keys to go in and out of prison. But of the many prison dreams, not once had I been a prison guard. This was the first time. Why? Simple. It's a little thing called the sin of omission. What I didn't say was simply allowing spiritual ignorance to imprison the minds of my fellow human beings. Unchecked prejudice is harmful in two ways. First, it could rub off on me and turn me into a bigot. Second, it will probably victimize someone. To my concrete self, my failure to call the other barber out was insignificant. But to my spirit, it was a big deal. The dream made me face my ugly side by depicting me as an enabler of imprisonment. To add insult to injury, I could not find my car when trying to go home after my shift was over. Which either means my spirit was reluctant to go back into that contaminated personality, or my concrete self was too busy looking in a worldly direction to see spiritual things like the re-entry process. Looking back on my sin of omission, I could have said something mild but effective, like, who knows? Maybe she'll turn out to be a good neighbor. But I didn't, and so my connected self prepared a little dream drama to convey the message about how I should be truer to my true self and should do a better job fulfilling my earthly mission. I can't go back and undo my mistake, but I still can learn from it to do the right thing the next time I encounter prejudice. In another couple of dreams around the same period, I got other signs of not being true to my own spirit. In one, my own mother did not know who I was. This harkens back to the biblical passage where Christ says that God will not know or acknowledge the wicked during the transition to an afterlife. In a dream the night following that, I was suspicious of a woman who seemed to know me and seemed to be trying to help me. In this dream it was me, my concrete self, that refused to know my own nurturing, connected self. Fortunately, I didn't cast the helper in a role as an enemy or actively dangerous agent. I may have had just barely enough lucidity to sense that the stranger was my own spirit, there to help me. Hence, my confused self never took over to create a nightmare from the encounter with the woman I didn't know. Distrust or doubt is not the same as defensive fear. The dream was showing me just where I had been standing in terms of the degree to which I really believe this individual spirit stuff. I'm still a bit lukewarm to it, but not outright resisting the efforts of my spiritual helper. I need more doses of the same medicine I am prescribing for others. I still need to get to know my connected self. The inner therapist. We normally think of our conscience, that small still voice within, as telling us what not to do. It's my belief that our own spirits contribute significantly to our sense of what we are called to do. The connected self provides messages about our mission. Additionally, most of us are blessed to have parents and others in our life who encourage us to do exemplary things, to be the best that we can be. Either way, inspired by our own spirits or learned from other positive people in the world, an often overlooked aspect of our conscience is its capacity to encourage us to step up to the plate and perform noble acts. It's unfortunate that we don't normally think of our conscience in that way. The moniker of North Star best fits this often overlooked function of the conscience. Perhaps both our North Star and our conscience are just other names for our own spirit. Case in point, my connected self gave me a helpful dream about my calling. For the first time in as long as I can remember, I was told in my dream to go do counseling with someone, a woman in this case. Always before, I sensed that I no longer was a legitimate psychology service provider. I hadn't been paid and wondered why. I wasn't sure where my office was. I would be working on reports, but had no clue what I should put in the report. I often dreamed that I was just volunteering for free and not really offering much of a service, just faking it. I often managed to go to a psychiatric ward or two to at least interact with some clients, but I seldom followed through with doing therapy or counseling in the dream. Until the other night. My dream boss, my connected self, assigned me a client. I proceeded to do legitimate psychological work. The night school session also oddly included a side trip dream. As I entered the prison room where my psychological services were provided, I saw it as a clear cubicle high in the mountains. This was borrowed from a movie I had seen prior to going to bed. In the movie, one sister was encouraging the other to hike to the peak of a mountain in the Swiss Alps that their mother and father had summited years ago. The trail began high up on the mountain after riding a tram to an observation point. The observation point had a glass cubicle where the sisters and a guide could view the Alps from, as though suspended in midair. The dream ended as I walked into the counseling room, doubling as an elevated glass cubicle. That's when my spirit re-entered my body. By inserting the mountain theme into my dream, my connected self was telling my concrete self that I was inspired, acting from a spiritually higher vantage point. I had been given both a message and a lift. My spirit showed me in the dream that I am a legitimate healer. I don't need external titles or official roles to be therapeutic in everyday interactions with others. I could be a legitimate healer by listening to others and helping them process their emotions. I can also give others a psychological and spiritual boost by writing books like this. The next day, while dining with good friends, I began telling all sorts of true stories about successful therapy experiences I had during my career. It had been a long time since I took trips down this particular memory lane. And never had I told one story after another like that. It happened more or less accidentally, causing me to hog the conversation in a braggadocious manner. I sensed, though, that my friends were supportive, probably willing to be there for me, understanding that it was something I needed to do at the time. And my stories did make me feel like I had been a legitimate healer and possibly still have the magic touch. Maybe now it will be through writing that helps others grow spiritually. My small, still voice within had become an outer expression of self-affirmation. I'm thankful that my wife and friends gave me the space to blurt it all out. It was reminiscent of how this book was inspired, by how I blurted out the fact that I think our spirits leave and re-enter our bodies at night. Heart of Hearts. My favorite Christmas movie is Christmas Oranges. The main character is a young girl who eventually melts the frozen heart of the man who ran the orphanage that she got moved to after the death of the compassionate woman who was head of the girl's original orphanage. The Scrooge-like head of the second orphanage had emotional scars that hardened him. One of the scars was his estranged relationship with his own daughter. Also, an underlying insecurity from having been an unwanted orphan himself may have contributed to his overcompensated obsession with rules and harsh discipline. His defensive actions, the experiential mode of doing, were interfering with his ability to love and to feel whole, his beingness. But the sweet little girl found out about his past. She believed that there was a human being somewhere inside the man, despite his harsh treatment of her. Partly because she reminded the man of his daughter, the orphan girl was able to eventually inspire him to try to locate and make amends with his long-lost child. With the help of his brother, who, for whatever reason, had become a loving thriver instead of a defensive survivor, the head of the orphanage finally found his daughter. In so doing, he experienced emotional liberation that allowed him to appreciate and love the orphan girl as well. The thing we call the heart may well be our spirit, the connected self that knows what we need to do to heal and grow, even when our concrete selves don't have a clue. Others, like the sweet orphan girl and the loving brother, can help us get in touch with our spirits that are never content to cover over and merely cope with our inner brokenness. The spirit of the orphan child communicated with the Scrooge-like man's own spirit. His relationship with his connected self greatly improved. People of high spiritual integrity, like the orphan girl, can help us find our own spiritual essence, our heart of hearts. Healthy human relationships can help restore our fullness of being. Mission clarification. Getting to know what our mission on Earth is helps us also get to know our connected self, because that is one of the main reasons we have it in the first place. It gives us inspiration and guidance to do our part in the grand reclamation project, traditionally called God's work. My dream last night further clarified my mission. The therapy-related dream a few days ago had me counseling an individual. Last night's dream had me performing group therapy. As I shared earlier, my status as a counselor and teacher in my dreams is often undermined by my own uncertainty about my legitimacy in those roles. My confused self misinterprets my dream frame role in terms of my concrete self's prior occupation. Last night's dream was another round of clarification about the significance and efficacy of my mission on Earth. There was nothing at all unusual about my role in the dream as a psychology service provider. It's been a highly consistent theme. What was remarkable was the fact that I got right down to work, with no questioning or doubt about my authority to do it. I was not a mere volunteer hoping to be of use, as had been the case of most of my previous prison counseling roles. This was the second consecutive dream of that theme in which I was clearly empowered to do my job. I confidently proceeded to help the prisoners who were in my group. First, I told the members of group that my purpose was to help them adjust to life outside of prison. Second, I stated that most of them are, in fact, likely to be paroled at some time, sooner or later. So now is the time to begin to prepare for that upcoming event and situation. By making these announcements, two important things were provided to my group participants. First, I was letting them know that what we perceive about ourselves and our limited perspective as a concrete self is not the whole truth. A greater truth lies beyond this metaphorical prison. Secondly, I was saying, I believe in you. I see your potential. You not only can get out of prison, but most likely will. I was creating a positive, self-fulfilling prophecy for them. I was inspiring them. Next, a Catholic priest entered our group and effectively contributed to the session. The priest inspired me to become energized spiritually, to be filled with the Spirit. I shared this experience with my group members. I believe that the message in this second frame of the dream was that there is something inherently spiritual, church-like, about my mission to help others gain psychological understanding and to nurture positive human potential. I was too legit to quit. That means I left the dream feeling more clearly called to do the very thing I'm attempting to do in this book, whether only a handful of people ever read it or many people benefit from its insights. I identified with my connected self and the mission he or she was assigned to my life to perform in the Grand Reclamation Project. Also, by achieving clarity about my life mission, I got to know my connected self better, which will help me more readily utilize its help in the future. An improved game plan improved the efficacy of the team. The night school session also taught me that we need to be open to help from others besides those in our own denominations or religion. My mission occurs in the context of what John Wesley called social holiness. In the dream, a Catholic priest contributed to a Methodist's social holiness. God works in mysterious ways. Heads up. I think the small, still voice within that serves at times as our conscience and at other times as our healer is also related to our intuition. We sense what's around the corner. We are subconsciously or semi-consciously given the heads up on what's about to happen. I have had several premonitory dreams that predicted events that occurred the next day with enough specificity that I could not, and still cannot, write them off as being mere coincidence. How is it possible to see into the future? Recall my earlier speculation about the metaphysics of time. God power can't fit the container of physical reality, so physical things get pushed along like a river. We call the flow of the river time. I first had this insight while employed as a stock worker. Not all the merchandise could fit on the shelves where the customer selects his/her items. The extras are stored on upper shelves beyond the reach of the customer. Still more was kept in storage areas not visible to the customer. It dawned on me that this might be an analogy of how time occurs. Each of us is like a customer in God's store. But his store of potential events and realities is greater than what we can see and reach in the retail section of the store. Physical reality is not big enough for God's reality. God's reality can only come out a little at a time. Some of it stays in the unseen storage areas, while some of it can be glimpsed by mystic or prophetic customers on shelves too difficult to quite reach and grasp. What is sensed is likely to soon occur in physical reality's future. God's abundance is like a pressure that pushes itself onto the limited shelves. The motion from the storage area to the upper shelves to the lower shelves that we call reality is like the flow of time. This became my stock worker's theory of time. End of the road. One night I dreamed I was in a car on a snowy road littered with bales of hay. I was having difficulty getting around the hay and keeping the car in control on the slippery road, but was managing well. My dad somehow entered the dream, either with me in the car or directing me from outside the car. My memory of his exact role in the dream was sketchy. Then the car and I came to a roadblock that consisted of a standard fence-like barrier that was being used to signify the closing or end of a road. On the other side of the sign/barrier was a cliff and chasm. To the left of the roadblock was a barn with its doors open. I could see its wooden floors with hay strewn about. I also saw some children playing there, followed by the appearance of Bud, my father-in-law. Bud is like a second father to me. We have had many heart-to-hearts about life and spiritual matters. In the dream, Bud was standing and smiling just inside and to the middle of the barn's big open doorway. He seemed to be greeting me, welcoming me, or introducing me to the joyous family event. I looked left of the barn, towards a house there. On the roof of the house was a Spanish angel who was working on the roof. She seemed to be tearing off old shingles to install new ones. She also seemed to be supervising the roof work being performed by various family members, including myself. I had gone instantly from looking up to the roof scene to being up on the roof, where I was tearing off the shingles. This dream turned out to be prophetic on more than one level. First, it foretold specific, highly atypical, events of the next day. That morning after the dream, while I was driving to work, I was stopped by a traffic jam just prior to getting off onto a 4-lane highway. The 2-lane highway that I was on was roadblocked and detoured into the nearby town. The fence-like roadblock was just like in my dream. This was the first time this road was closed in the 2 years that I had been using it. There had been no signs in the preceding days that announced a planned detour. That's because the closing was probably the result of a car accident. A few months after the event, I noticed a roadside memorial placed in the area corresponding to the previously closed section of the road. It is highly likely that a fatal car accident had occurred just prior to the roadblock foretold in my dream. The detour resulting from the blocked road meandered through a town. I couldn't believe it when it took me right past a tall church spire that had scaffolding all around it and other indications of reconstruction work on the top of the old European-style church. This was the first time I recall noticing the reconstruction work on the landmark, although I later saw it easily from the 4-lane highway that goes by the town. I am convinced that my dream had foretold these highly unusual events. But the dream was also preparing me for more personal events that would transpire in the months ahead. Bud had developed a rare lung condition. The doctors didn't even know the cause of this disease. We thought the prognosis was fair, in that some patients are able to manage the illness with certain treatments. Bud's condition, however, went from mildly impaired to fatal in the next few months. He showed courage and a surprisingly positive attitude, even though he was getting less and less air. He even went to Disneyland with his wife, Carolyn, my mother-in-law. The two of them had won the trip in a local bank's random drawing prize contest. Bud had to use an oxygen tank and a wheelchair during the vacation. He also came, oxygen tank and all, to to see the final building stages of the little house, as we all called it. Many years earlier, he and Carolyn had bought a wooded lot in a gated resort community. This purchase was made during the heyday of the back-to-nature craze in the mid to late 70s. Through the ensuing years, we would occasionally, usually weekends, drive down to the retreat community, tent camp at the campground there, and take advantage of the resort's recreational facilities during the next few days. We swam in the public swimming pool, as well as at the lakeside beach. We fished in the lake, played on the tennis courts, and rested in the air-conditioned lodge. In addition to enjoying those amenities, we took time to work on the undeveloped lot. We used a sickle to clear it of brush and undergrowth, and we mowed it. Each time we returned, it seemed as overgrown as the time before. Finally, some 20 years later, Bud and Carolyn decided to build a house on the lot. They wanted to create a special vacation getaway spot to share with family. Since their budget was limited, we all had to pitch in. We did most of the work that was required past the point of the framing and roofing of the house. We made the 2.5-hour drive many times to work long hours on the project. Friends also occasionally rolled up their sleeves and helped us. We really put our hearts into the little house. The teamwork was so inspirational that I ended up writing a poem about it. A friend of the family scribed the poem in calligraphy, and we placed it on the living room wall. Here is the poem. The little house in the woods. The little house in the woods sits peaceful under the shade. Its imperfections perfect, because they are family-made, though just a modest dwelling, made of boards and plans and sweat. The memories we build within will make a mansion yet, whatever the future may bring. As each of us departs, the little house will welcome us, forever in our hearts. End of poem. So, when Bud saw the finished house, all but the overhead cabinets in the kitchen, it was quite an accomplishment. That was the last time he saw the little house. His disease had progressed quickly. Bud died in his own bed, at home, surrounded by his family, his wife, 3 children, 6 grandchildren, 2 son-in-laws, and a daughter-in-law. His attitude throughout the whole process was inspirational. He told us that he wanted to live, but that he accepted God's will for him. Bud became a powerful example of dying with dignity. I can only hope that I am able to die someday with that same dignity. The dream that had occurred a few months earlier had foretold the end of the road for my father-in-law. Images of Bud's legacy of the little house were woven into the dream. The dream also incorporated general themes of fatherly guidance, reflective of my Heavenly Father, of family love and family life, of the presence and importance of spiritual guidance, the Spanish angel, and of the faith-giving reassurance that everything will be okay. Chaos is coming. More recently, I had a dream that was disturbingly incoherent and dizzyingly chaotic. In retrospect, I may have already sensed that I was getting too much over my skies with seemingly good new ideas that I was allowing to interfere with good listening. Much of the dream's unsatisfactory arbitrariness may have been a reminder to me that I wasn't giving enough priority to important things like my love relationship with my wife, which requires, among other things, good old listening. But the incoherence in the dream also prepared me for the relationship curveballs I would receive from Becky the following day. One time too many, I interrupted her with my exciting insights and brilliant ideas. She felt disrespected, was angry, and cared enough to honestly confront me about my very bad habit. What I hoped to be a leisurely breakfast date with her turned out to be a long therapy session in which we got the issue out in the open. I gradually worked my way past my excuses, empathized with her, and contritely owned my shortcoming that caused her pain. I still have a long way to go when it comes to listening skills. Thoughts flood my mind. It is a real challenge to stop chasing those beautiful butterflies in my head and tend instead to what others are sharing. But if I want to live in an interpersonal and social world, I must strive to do better. I may never excel at listening, but at least I can learn to listen well enough to no longer neglect or hurt others, especially those I love. Our relationship hiccup that threatened to ruin our date seemed just like the chaotic, confusing dream that I had the night before. Before digging myself into an even deeper hole, My recollection of the dream prompted me to heed its forewarning. Here it is, I thought. This sense of knowing ahead of time helped me calm down and work through the friction in my relationship. It was as though my connected self told me that I would have some metaphorical lemons come my way. It was up to me to either succumb to bitterness or choose to make lemonade. Sensing the lemons ahead of time helped me prepare. Of course, it also doesn't hurt that I'm older and wiser about working those things with the woman I love. Despite the initial and somewhat stubborn chaos, we ended up having a nice breakfast. Well, brunch, by the time we finished our processing. I felt like my connected self connected me to a better way than merely defending myself and denying the issue, failing to own my flaw. My spirit wants better for me than that. Thank God for his individualized presence.